All right. Thank you for joining us, Martha Tettenborn. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. How are you? Nice to
We're
see
doing.
your smiling face about exactly a month or a year after last time I saw you in person.
I know. So this is our second interview, and the first time we interviewed you is, first of all, because you're awesome. But you had written a book. You are a registered dietitian in Canada. You are also a Primal Health Coach graduate, and you had written a book called Hacking Chemo and how you used nutritional protocols to help basically survive chemo and come out the other end in better shape. And it's probably worth you speaking to that a little bit, giving our audience a little bit of that background. And then Erin and I can talk about why we thought you would be a great candidate to write this course for us, Functional Therapeutic Diets. So do you mind sharing a little bit of your story and your background?
Oh, not at all. Not at all. So I've been a dietitian for about, over 35 years. Registered dietitian, licensed in Ontario, Canada, and I've done a wide variety of things over the years, but settled in long-term care, geriatrics, where of course there are huge numbers of people who deal with the end result of chronic health problems, diabetes, Parkinson's, and of course dementia, Alzheimer's, some cancer, but mostly more of the chronic disease type stuff, and things like arthritis that, and heart disease that have people debilitated enough that they require long-term care.
Yeah.
And as time went on through my career, I really wasn't happy with the status quo. I wasn't feeling like I was helping people. And I found that frustrating. And so I've always been a lifelong learner. So I just kind of dug into what was out there. And I trained in the 1980s when low fat was brand new, cutting edge science. Everything was going low fat. I can remember being at a session once where someone said, low fat is here to stay. Like that will never change. And it was like, yeah. She has since come to that was a public health nutritionist friend of mine. And she has since come to one of my seminars that I did here locally a few years ago. So I was surprised to see her in the audience. But anyways, I started doing some digging and discovered low carb and discovered that fat was not the enemy, and discovered Mark Sisson and the Mark's Daily Apple podcast and community. And I was there from about, I don't know, maybe 2007 onwards. I was part of that long time ago. And so eventually I decided I really needed to put my money where my mouth was and do some extra certification. And so in 2016, I took the Primal Health Coach full certification. I was one of the last of the quote unquote legacy students before the program changed a little bit, but I have since recertified numerous times and kept that license up because that really matters to me. So that's kind of my background. I still work in long-term care where I have to follow the ministry protocols and, we serve the standard diet for the most part in those facilities. And so I still operate in that world, but privately I was counseling and coaching in a low carb primal sort of approach. And then in 2018, I discovered that I had cancer. Ovarian cancer, stage 1. But I had a large ovarian cyst removed that nobody knew was cancer until after it was out. So I was highly recommended to do chemotherapy. And that's when, the rubber hit the road and I got really serious about looking at alternatives and things I could do for myself, and discovered that there was this entire field called cancer metabolism, and that it just dovetailed perfectly into low carb ketogenic diets, low sugar, insulin response, all those things that are part of what we do as primal health coaches. And, but tweaked for cancer. It's a different situation. So that started me down that path. The area wasn't very well described yet. There was research done, but it hadn't really made it into the public sphere yet. And so I decided that I was going to use a ketogenic diet and fasting around my chemotherapy, as had been used in research studies in California and some other places, to impact on my response to chemotherapy. And I had an absolutely stunning response to those interventions. My path through chemotherapy was pretty awesome compared to what most people go through, particularly with that kind of chemo. And I mean, chemo's still poison. You don't feel good, but I didn't feel awful, and that was kind of amazing. So I was angry that nobody knew this stuff, especially dietitians, especially oncologists, like the normal medical field didn't know this stuff. So I started a blog to kind of document my journey, not just the physical stuff like the nutritional stuff, but also the mental and emotional and spiritual aspects of going through a health crisis like this. And started the blog, and then decided that I needed to go further. So with the nudging of some friends, I started writing a book. And in 2020, Hacking Chemo was published, and it is to help to get the word out there that there are empowering nutritional interventions that you can do to help yourself get through cancer treatment.
Okay,
So,
empowering nutritional interventions. That's a great phrase. I always think through your story. What's interesting is that you specifically used this ketogenic and intermittent fasting protocol to help manage the experience of chemotherapy, which I think is so interesting because you sort of welcomed in or took part in the conventional approach to cancer treatment, and you were managing the symptoms, let's say, of that scenario through nutrition in a lot of ways, and the full experience. And symptoms and the way people feel in their body is honestly in the domain of health coaches. So where medications and diagnoses and treatments are not, the way people feel is in our domain, symptomatology, right? And so these empowering nutritional interventions can be within our scope of practice, and we're going to talk about that during this conversation for sure. But I think something that you mentioned early on in your origin story about, being a dietitian for 35 years and realizing that you weren't having the impact on health that you maybe had dreamed you were going to have. And I'm assuming every dietitian, every doctor, every nurse goes to school thinking, I really want to help people. I want to impact the health of the population. And how many times do we hear it, Laura, from people who just, that impact isn't showing up for them? So you moved to health coaching while keeping your dietetics practice going. Do you feel that as a health coach, or take us through as a health coach, how you feel maybe the opportunity for impact is greater?
well, it is. I mean, the opportunity to help people in long-term care is definitely there. But if you really want to make a change before people become that debilitated, to help them when they're still in the active phase of their lives where they're wanting to do stuff, right? Those are the things that really got me interested in health coaching, like the wellness aspect, because what I do in my day job is really not about wellness. What I live in my personal life, I do for the purpose of wellness and energy and joy and all those things that make life grand. In long-term care, I deal with keeping people comfortable and happy. When someone comes in and they're 90 and they've eaten toast for breakfast every morning, you're not going to tell them not to have toast.
Right.
But if you could get the facility to put some ground flax meal into their oatmeal that they serve to everybody every single morning, then you're getting in some healthy fiber and some healthy fats. And, those are like small changes are the way that we can really help the people in the long-term care. And then of course, what I do is individualized. I had the most amazing day yesterday because I helped a man post-stroke who's been on a tube feeding since January to have his first oral feeding. He wanted to try he was NPO, which is nothing by mouth. And we sat down with a little dish of cottage cheese and some extra thick juice, like that was thickened up, so it was kind of jellyish. And then we sat and he had like a pureed grilled cheese sandwich, which I know for most people sounds awful, but he said to me, it was the best. He can still speak even though he couldn't swallow. And he said, that's the best meal I've had in months.
Aw.
And I wrote on, he's deaf, so I wrote on his whiteboard, ha ha, that's the only meal you've had in months, right? And he laughed. And it was just the most wonderful, wonderful day. The whole building was happy for this man, that he was able to come out of his room and eat something. So, I mean, there's wonderful things you can do within healthcare settings, within allopathic medicine, but, you know, let's catch them before they have strokes. Like, let's get life empowered for, you know, particularly people my age. Like, I'm in my early 60s. Like, you can do a lot in your early 60s, in your 60s, 50s, whatever, to make sure that, you know, you don't end up having those situations.
Yeah. Amen. And that's what I hear. So in my role, as you know, I'm the admissions director here, and I talk to people coming from all sorts of different professions. And I have spoken to more people that are in the clinical realm right now that are saying this. And really, it's a lot of nurses, physicians assistants, and people that are saying, I'm just kind of tired of playing whack-a-mole all the time. And I feel like when I see people in the hospital, it's almost too late. I'd rather be working with people to keep them out of the hospital. That's what I'm hearing. And that's what I think that's what spurred the art of health coaching to begin with. You know, and I think once people really understand, because that's another conversation I have, what do health coaches do? You know, coaches do a lot of things. So, and I can go down that rabbit hole for sure. But at the end of the day, you know, this notion that, you know, we help people change in order to be able to achieve the positive health-based outcomes they're looking for. And of course, one of the biggest needle movers in that mechanism is going to be food and how people eat, you know, and for this man that you used as an example, you know, this is just one example of just improving how this man feels and giving him a better day. But if we can get to people before that, it's a total game changer. And nutrition plays a big, huge role. And from a scope of practice point of view, depending on where you live, the role of nutrition and the depth and just how specific we can get all of these things is going to differ based on your scope of practice. And so, you know, that's something for health coaches to be aware of. But to use Erin's term, our clients are coming to us talking about these symptoms they have. I have low energy. I'm not going to the bathroom. My stomach hurts, brain fog, all of these things. And we can help them kind of puzzle through and help them work through what they ate and what they did that day to try to help make connections and sort of connect the dots. And we really wanted to, when it came to this course that we asked you to help us write, Functional Therapeutic Diets, is from the standpoint of a health coach to be able to indicate how certain foods affect certain people and where bringing up certain concepts might make sense. And we felt that when we launched this course, that it needed to be written by a registered dietitian, somebody that understands the intricacy of nutrition science and the impact on the body and what have you. And the fact that you had written a book and you already know how to write, the fact that you used a nutritional therapy yourself and, you know, in real life made you the perfect candidate for this. You know, so thank you, first of all, for the time that you spent and lending your expertise into kind of putting this out there and helping to make something like this, I guess, accessible to health coaches.
Well, you're welcome.
First of all. So, and we asked, you know, really at the end of the day, we kind of gave you this guideline of some sort of nutritional protocols that are often used therapeutically. We have a bit of a list of them, but what was your initial thought when you kind of started down this project road and sort of how you thought you could frame it?
Well, interestingly, I looked at a lot of them and kind of went, I don't really know what these are. Like, yeah, no, as a dietitian, I haven't really had experience with these. And that is one of the things that is kind of different about this, is that these are often protocols that have been developed by somebody with a passion for a particular tiny niche of symptomatology and disease and body function. And they've been often been championed by, you know, an individual or several individuals. And I, as dietitians, they aren't things we learned.
Interesting.
Now, I mean, my training was a long time ago, but we also keep up on continuing ed, and a lot of what dietitians do is prescriptive. So, I mean, there are certainly a lot of dietitians that, you know, work in hospitals, and they assign tube feedings, and they, you know, there's a lot of number crunching and all that kind of stuff. The diets that we are approaching in this course aren't really number crunching based, other than, you know, like a keto diet where you're specifically looking for macros or something. And we do the keto diet as part of this course, but a therapeutic approach to a whole foods keto diet, not just any keto diet, right? And where it can be used in therapeutic situations. But when I looked at them, I thought, well, I don't really know what an AIP involves, and I'm not sure I know what, you know, salicylates are. And I had to do a whole heck of a lot of learning in order to be able to write the course. The underlying knowledge of, you know, 35 years of dietetics and Primal Health Coach and keto and stuff is there, but to be able to then go the next step with these specific protocols was a really big learning curve.
Yeah.
So, and these, so I guess what I'm saying is these aren't dietary approaches, if you want to call it that most dietitians would be using.
Right.
I can say, though, that the ones that we chose to leave in the course, because when we had our initial outline, there was a couple there that were a little wingy and out there and not supported by any evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and those ones we just kind of, we mention, but we don't indicate that it's something that we really think Primal Health coaches should be behind. Yep. So there's a couple that were in the original outline that have now just become sort of sidebar mentions in the course. But the ones that are here, there's actual science behind them. There's evidence. There's, you know, scientific institutions doing research on these dietary approaches. So, you know, it's not wingnut stuff. It's, you know, it's not way out there. It's real.
That's right. That's a really important point of view in the sense that in creating this course, we were intentional about choosing diets that have a body of research behind them, or are working on having a body of research behind them. So we ended up with a course that has a pretty nimble, tight little list of dietary approaches that we feel confident are useful, and again, backed by science. The chapters that you wrote are just, they're excellent because we dive deeply through the premise, the therapeutic uses, how to execute everything from shopping to cooking to, you know, helping clients overcome the barriers of these are very new ways of eating. You evoked the autoimmune protocol a second ago. I've taken a client through that protocol. It's hard. It is really hard.
It looks really hard.
It is really hard. The coaching that you do is a lot about, okay, this very specific elimination and then reintroduction thing, which takes a long time. And kind of to your point earlier, when you were, you know, writing your blog about your own cancer journey, it's also the emotional, spiritual, and mental challenge of eliminating entire food groups, foods that, you know, we think are healthy. In the autoimmune protocol, for example, eggs come off the table, some vegetable families come off the table. People believe these are healthy foods. What's wrong with vegetables? I thought they were good for you. And it's like, they are, unless they aren't. And we're going to have to find out if they are for you. Right.
Yeah.
So it's pretty fun. But one thing that you mentioned, a couple of things you mentioned when you were explaining and sort of answering Laura's question is you dropped this idea of the niche of people have these specific niches of symptomatology. I think that's interesting. Right. So for example, I don't work with people who are in the autoimmune spectrum anymore. I did have a couple clients early on in my health coaching career. I took them through the autoimmune protocol because I knew it. I have the book back there, that giant book. It's an awesome book. Sarah Ballantyne's book. It's a great resource. But I'd never had an autoimmune disease. So I felt like I was like, I subjectively don't understand this, but subjectively, I really understand insulin resistance. So that's the symptomatology that I zero in on. All the symptoms of insulin resistance and maybe subclinical prediabetes. I know what it feels like to be absolutely exhausted, gaining fat rapidly, having unmanageable cravings, riding, excursions of blood sugar. I know those symptoms. And so that's kind of where I focus my attention. So the deal here is a health coach cannot and should not be all things to all people. We really do want to zero in on what we know, what we can help with. And so we have a collection of nutritional strategies here that can help for a lot of things. But you described how, in dietitian world, it's this prescriptive approach. It's the objective approach. We have this diagnosis, here's the treatment plan, here's the nutritional protocol. In health coach world, we really do play in the subjective. How are people feeling? What can we do to support them? And they report back on if that feels different for them. We are in the realm of feelings, and that's symptoms, really. I think that's the big difference between our two worlds. Would you say?
Yeah, I mean, in the allopathic medicine world, like in the dietitian world, first of all, you don't get a chance to have the level of contact and the level of interaction that you do with a coaching client, because in Canada, the government's paying for it. In the US, some HMO or somebody's paying for it. And so there are, limits, like here, prescribe this diet, instruct them on this diet. Have you discharged them yet? Make your progress note and discharge them, right? And the options for actually hearing their subjective response to the diets really often doesn't even exist.
Yeah.
Or you get one follow-up and, then you're expected to discharge them. But when you're making wellness changes or changes to symptomatology, you've got to listen, and you got to be a detective and kind of dig underneath what they're saying to, what symptoms you're hearing, because often people don't understand how things connect.
Yeah.
Right. They just don't get it. And so they'll say something and, oh, well, my guts are rolling around. And it's like, so what are we talking about? Are we talking about your stomach? Is it up here, or is it low in your gut? Is it on the, the right side or the left side? When does it happen after you eat? They don't make connections. It's up to us to kind of make connections. And, geez, if you're are we talking about cramps? Are you passing bad gas? And when you pass gas, does it stink?
All the fun conversations.
I actually have a section in one of the chapters, and it's called "Having the Poop Conversation," because you got to be able to talk about bodily functions, because the digestive tract is both ends, right? It's the top end and the bottom end. And we know how important gut health is, right?
This is such an interesting point of view, because it's so wild, because I've been a health coach for so long, and I have these conversations all the time. You literally just expressed a conversation I have with clients, like, oh, I'm bloated. Okay, where? Up high or down low? These questions that are so into the weeds. Anybody's listening to this who's been in my master coach course is going to laugh, because these granular questions, the word granular is one that I use a lot when I teach health coaches, because we get to go granular. We have the opportunity, from the perspective of the interval of time that we get to connect with our client, that we can go granular. This is how you felt last week. This is how you feel this week. How are you going to feel next week and then the following week? And we don't have that really precise short interval in the allopathic model. So we have the opportunity to keep a pulse on changing symptoms. And clients, I think this is kind of one of the points you're making, or this is how I interpreted it. Humans, people, health consumers aren't even trained to pick up on their own symptomatology. So we, in some ways, we're training them to pay attention to how they feel and to report back on how they feel. And that's a lifelong gift.
It's absolutely a lifelong gift. And it relates to that whole concept of root medicine, of going past just like, okay, so you said you have bloat, so let's give you this medicine.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason doctors never ask you what you eat, because it's not a one-word answer. It's not even a one sentence or one paragraph answer.
Right.
And they don't have the time for that, right?
And it's hard to answer. When you think about a lot of the nutritional research that's out there, so much of it is done on basically food frequency questionnaires where people are asked to reflect on what they ate over the past year. And half the time, if I ask my client what they ate Tuesday, they don't remember. They don't remember, right? So not only is it difficult for it's to your point, not a one-word answer, but the answer may not be all that reliable. I mean, I can speak in general terms what I typically eat, but from any one given day where I might have been like, oh gosh, I felt really bloated on Tuesday. But for me to be able to go back and be like, gosh, what did I eat? That's why a lot of times with my clients, I don't necessarily want them keeping macros unless, to your point, we're trying to shoot for something. I just like a food log of just, let's generally write down what we're eating so that we can then take a look and go back and remember and try to tag to when you feel that symptom, whatever it was, brain fog, bloating, gas, whatever. Let's go back and see what you ate last, a few hours later. And it helps clients then kind of make the connection. I don't know if anybody else does that, but when I've got clients that keep expressing symptoms, I'll ask them, hey, do you think you can handle this for just 1 week? I don't make them do it. We got to be a little bit of a detective here. It's kind of like a diary. Do you think you can do that? And even if it's just taking pictures with their phone and texting it to me, here's what I had, here's what I ate, if that's easy, then we'll do that. And then you can tell me, ooh, this is it. The brain fog. I noticed that when I drove home, or whatever the case may be. For what's interesting and hearing you to kind of describe what you're talking about, just my own sort of health, journey, for me, the big trigger was dairy, and not one person brought it up to me. Even a dietitian didn't bring up that the fact that I was drinking a lot of whey protein and I ate yogurt every day and I loved cheese, and not one person was like, hey, dairy has a tendency for some people to be inflammatory. And oh, by the way, one of the responses is excess mucus, like no one said that to me. But if I had been seeing a health coach and going through these steps, it'd be like, gee, these are some of the things. And I did an allergy test. Nothing came up on an actual allergy test. It wasn't until I saw someone from more of a naturopathic world where we did a sensitivity test, which I know they're not all reliable, but this one was a glaring, like dairy's an issue, that I went off of it. Yeah.
What you just said, you just said something that I hope every health coach listens. So you were kind of telling the story about your potential dairy sensitivity, and now nobody had ever even suggested it. And the way you articulated it was, nobody ever said to me, hey, for some people, dairy can cause a sensitivity reaction, and that can generate excess mucus. That statement, that's in the health coach domain. Some people experience this symptom when they consume dairy. That's just generalized. That's an example of generalized information. That's not somebody saying, hey, you're allergic to dairy, Laura. It was, some people. I just thought that was a really well executed sentence that I hope everybody picked up on.
And also the basic concept of, why don't you try giving it up for a week and see how you feel?
Exactly.
That's all it takes. And we have a chapter on basic elimination diets, and it includes a template for a diary, just the food logs or a diary that you can keep with some little trigger comments to suggest, did you use condiments? Did you add fats? Did you, like to get the details in there? Because people will write down grilled cheese sandwich. Well, what kind of bread did you use? Did you use butter or margarine? Did you fry it in olive oil? Did you fry it in bacon fat? What kind of cheese did you use? Like there are so many nuances to generalized stuff. But yeah, that concept of, before you go anywhere else, with this, like even before sensitivity testing, just try taking it out, you know?
Yes.
And
100%.
that's where health coaches can really help with that kind of stuff, because that's really basic. It's,
Yes.
you know,
Mhm.
knowing where dairy is found in food.
Yeah.
Something like that. Like that's education. That's not prescriptive. That's not the you know, exclusive domain of health, you know, registered health professionals. You can say like, yeah, whey protein is dairy, you know,
Yes.
and people will just kind of go like mind blown, right? Really?
I just had a conversation with a friend of mine whose son is very sensitive to dairy and gluten. And he said, but he needs protein. Can I give him whey protein? And I said, that's a dairy protein. I would avoid that if I were you, but people don't know. People don't know. I think this food journal that you've made for this course is awesome, because we were talking a second ago about how I literally had a conversation with a client yesterday who had a bit of a weird gut reaction to something she ate in the last 2 weeks, and she couldn't really remember what it was. But I think if you said, well, you know, I had a grilled cheese sandwich, and that, to your point, isn't enough information. People can remember when you prompt them, was it grilled in margarine or butter? Oh yeah, butter, definitely. Okay, was it whole wheat bread or white bread? You know, like if we prompt them to a certain degree, they'll start to put it together. And we don't need to know how many ounces of cheese or how many grams of bread. We don't need it to be that granular, again with that word, of a food journal. It's just the basics. Generally what I ate, generally when. You know, it's a really cool resource that you created for us.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
And yeah, this course is full of all kinds of things. I do think we should maybe just get into the course just like at a high level.
Yeah.
So I mean, I have it open here so I can walk us through sort of the chapters, and we don't have to go deeply into them, but just by way of listing them, we at the top of the course, we have, you know, what is a therapeutic diet and how can a health coach use it? I would like to come back to that later, because I do really want us to, you know, I love talking about scope of practice. I think it's really crucial. But then we have these, let's see, it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 diets that we have kind of zeroed in on. So the first one, now, Martha, this will come as a surprise to you because this was a last minute editorial decision I made. So surprise, I combined Primal and Paleo into one chapter because I think they're the same. So we have the Primal Paleo chapter, Paleo diet. So we start with this one. Now, obviously that's our wheelhouse. We're all primal health coaches. We all follow some kind of a paleo ancestral diet. But in a lot of ways, the paleo diet is the simplest, most basic of the elimination diets. I would call it that. And maybe I'm biased because I've been eating a paleo diet for 15 years. But I don't know, take us through at a high level, Martha, what your perspective is on why the paleo diet is a useful elimination or therapeutic diet.
Yeah, it's probably the first biggest leap out of standard American diet and into a whole foods, animal-based, appropriate for humans diet. And so by taking away a lot of the crap from the industrial and, you know, and GMO sort of worlds, like those ultra processed things, you make that huge first step into improved wellness. It takes out the sugar, it takes out the high starch grains, it takes out the commodity crop, you know, deconstructed and reconstructed food-like substances, if you want to call them that, and relies back on foods that have been part of the human diet for 2.5 million years. That, you know, the traditional paleo doesn't even include dairy products because they are considered to be part of the agricultural revolution. Now, I mean, that and paleo or primal does include them as a cultured and, you know, moderate use sort of addition, and used for for flavor as opposed to being a major protein source in a lot of ways. So that's the first big step into wellness. And for a lot of people who are just having general age-related decline, maybe they're showing some insulin resistance, they're showing some inflammation, they're putting on weight without really knowing why, they're under stress, they're eating badly because they pick things up at the convenience store. And so moving into, a really supportive primal paleo sort of approach is an enormous first step. And for a lot of people, that will bring them a long ways towards better, right? Not always optimal. And that's where the rest of the course kind of fits in, is that there are people for whom that's not quite enough. And, but there's a really robust discussion of those diets, and not just, if you're a primal health coach already, you know this, you kind of know this stuff on a fairly in-depth level, but kind of how to use it therapeutically, I guess, is, if you're seeing particular things like brain fog, like, the gut dysfunction and stuff, that those are things that can be helped by the basic elimination of the sugar, the ultra processed foods, the industrial seed oils, and most of the grains as well. So that's kind of, I think that's why it's the first chapter, right?
It makes perfect sense.
First big step. Yep.
Yeah, you explained that perfectly. It's the first step out of the standard American diet, and it's this low inflammatory, low insulin producing approach that it moves the dial on a lot of people's symptoms.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah, and for a lot of people, that may only ever be as far as they need to go.
Yep.
Right. So you might as well start there, right? In terms of like the idea of coaching and sustainability, taking that first step rather than diving into something as tough as autoimmune. Right. Starting with paleo. I have found even folks that eventually needed to move on to something more, they felt measurably better just making that one step, but there were still some mingling, like underlying symptoms, or something new popped up because they've been feeling crummy for so long. I didn't realize I had like this other symptom all of a sudden.
Oh yeah. You're peeling the onion, right?
Exactly. But it's really a phenomenal first step for people out of the standard American diet.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I mean, even like a ketogenic diet is a next step past that. And it's, and it's a tool. It's something that you can use for particular situations, but for a lot of people, it doesn't need to be where you live your life, right? Primal paleo principles, for the most people, will be where you can optimally feel wonderful.
Yeah.
And then, say the other dietary approaches that are in this course build on that. Yeah. And are further tweaks to try and get your people past whatever other thing that the onion has revealed, right, as you peel it.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, obviously I start all my clients on a paleo approach, and then sometimes we sometimes occasionally go into these deeper approaches, which is kind of where we're going to move through. So the second chapter here is the ketogenic diet. So now we are talking about zeroing in on macros and being a little bit more manipulating macronutrient quantities, we'll say, not ratios per se.
Balances, maybe.
Balances. Yeah, that's a great pro. So the ketogenic diet is something that you specifically are very knowledgeable about. So, I mean, how fun or easy was this chapter for you to write?
That was the first one I wrote, the very first one. Because it was the one that I sort of said when I started this, like, let me start with keto and carnivore, because those are the ones that I can do without having to do the in-depth learning. Yeah. Mind you, by the time you take what you think you know and you are actually going to put it down in a format that's going to teach somebody else, you still end up doing a whole lot of research and learning. But I used the ketogenic diet for the entire time that I was doing chemotherapy. Which was about 5 months. I stayed in ketosis. I used a monitor. I made sure I was in ketosis. And that was a very important tool for me during that time. I mean, I didn't have a single alcoholic beverages. I didn't have a single, not a dab of, I never cheated once, if you want to call it cheating. I never sort of stepped outside the ketogenic diet for that time. But it's not where I live my life on an everyday basis, because I don't feel like I need to be in ketosis to feel optimally well. And in fact, I sleep better if I have some starches at supper. I know that about myself. So, I mean, that's the way my world works. I eat low carb earlier in the day. I have some sort of starch with my supper, and life is better that way. So, that's me doing me, and everybody has to find their own place. But the ketogenic diet is a powerful, powerful tool for, for certain situations. We do talk a little bit about the keto for cancer stuff in the chapter, but for a lot of people, it's about, managing blood sugar control and clearing brain fog. And there's information in there about using it for epilepsy as well. Not that that's something that a health coach would be doing, but just that this is where the ketogenic diet originated, was in the treatment of epilepsy.
In some cases, a health coach, so this kind of veers into the conversation around scope. A health coach working in a medical practice may have been, may receive a client patient who is working through an epilepsy protocol with a doctor, and the doctor may have prescribed a ketogenic approach, and the health coach's job is to help the client execute a ketogenic approach, right? So
absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, when you talk about scope, it's like, you can't say, oh, you're diabetic, right? Lord, I mean, I can't say that as a registered dietitian. I'm not allowed to diagnose. That is beyond my scope of practice.
Right.
And that's in the legislation, right? But if a doctor has said you are diabetic and you would really benefit from a low carbohydrate approach, then someone can come to you and say,
my doctor's
I've been diagnosed as diabetic and the doc is putting me on these medications, but I'd really, he's recommended a low carb approach and I'm willing to try that. And then you have the ability as a health coach to do the lifestyle stuff that is going to make that work.
Yeah.
And they might come to you with a script from a dietitian that says, this is my protocol, but they might not too. There's docs now who are just saying, like, let's start with this.
Yeah.
So great.
So we go from the ketogenic diet, and you're talking about this, as you said, in terms of use for therapy. This isn't necessarily weight loss and all this other stuff, although that could be a side benefit. But so do you get into a little bit about which types of people have benefited, or which people with certain diagnoses have benefited from the use of a ketogenic diet or symptomatology? How do you address that in terms of therapy?
Well, we talk about, how a keto diet is used beyond sort of a primal diet. So how a keto diet can be used for reducing insulin resistance and managing blood sugars, right?
Awesome.
How it can be used, for in cancer treatment, we at a high level. So,
Gotcha.
It's not the kind of thing, if that was something that you as the collective you as a health coach decided was your niche, then fine, you dig deeper into that. That's my niche as a health coach, not as a dietitian, because I don't practice as a dietitian outside of Ontario. But as a health coach, I help people who want to use nutritional therapies to get them through their cancer treatments.
Yeah.
So along their cancer journey. And so, and I'm careful that I'm not prescriptive as much as I am supportive and educational in helping with that. So
love it.
Yeah. Inside the course, there's in every chapter, there is a lesson called therapeutic uses. So for every one of these diets, we have a therapeutic uses chapter, which explains where this particular nutritional strategy is best used. And we do have lists of people who have maybe diagnosed disease states or symptoms. We're not diagnosing them, but for example, women with PCOS, cancer patients, people who've been diagnosed with mental health issues like anxiety, depression, bipolar, et cetera. So we have these lists of like people who could benefit from based on diagnosed disease states or clusters of symptoms. Clusters of symptoms are interesting, and what the generally understood benefits of the diets are. So we have, every chapter has explained kind of the use case. Pretty quick.
Interestingly, the way that ketogenic and low carbohydrate diets or nutritional interventions for metabolic approaches, I guess is the best way to word, for cancer was a huge thing. In the last 4 years, that kind of blew wide open. You go to a conference now, there'll be like at least a half a day devoted to cancer. The thing that's blowing wide open right at this moment is mental health.
Yes.
Yeah. The whole Metabolic Minds, podcast, and the new, I think it's the Brinsky family is. Anyways, the concept of using metabolic approaches, including the ketogenic diet, for bipolar, schizophrenia, depression, all kinds of mental health issues, is blowing wide open at the moment. And that's, I think, the next big thing.
Yeah.
Super exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we moved from keto to carnivore. I will say that, I don't do a lot of ketogenic nutritional programming with my clients, but I have taken clients into a carnivore approach. Clients who were managing the symptoms of Crohn's and colitis, and who have said to me, I suspect, this is a client self-reporting symptoms, I suspect vegetables are causing my flare-ups. Would it be okay if I tried not eating vegetables for a while? Sure can. Let's go. Let's run a carnivore experiment. Let's do it. The client self-reported the symptoms. I'm just the health coach helping them execute and resourcing. Like, here's generally how plant, phytochemicals can irritate the gut of people who already have irritated guts, like those suffering Crohn's and colitis. Let's try it with incredible results, might I add. Incredible results. Anytime I've had a client who's struggling with an irritable bowel disease, this has been a remarkable intervention for them. And by the way, they could bring vegetables back in eventually, just like you were able to kind of come off a ketogenic approach once you used it for its therapeutic purpose. And you're able to, come out of keto whenever you want. These folks were able to reintroduce plant materials in some cases because the gut was sort of brought back to ground zero.
It's the ultimate elimination diet.
That it is.
Yeah.
But again, there's a right way to do it and a not so right way to do it. I mean, if you're going to eat pepperoni sticks from the gas station as your main protein source, you are not doing carnivore right.
Right. Oh, I really love this chapter because I obviously geek out on like evolutionary biology, as I think maybe we all do on some level.
Yep.
And you go really into detail about in this chapter about like our physiology and how it's designed for meat eating, which it's just such a cool part of the chapter. I am obsessed with it. It's so great. It's really cool. It's really cool.
It is such fascinating information.
Yeah, it is. So carnivore diet, pretty basic, all meat, animal-based, I guess, is kind of where the carnivore community is leaning, because there's, some things like honey and stuff that may or may not be a factor there, and lots of ways to take on the carnivore diet. But it made it into our course because it's just been compelling enough. I would say that when I went to holistic nutrition school and I learned all these elimination diets, including the kooky ones that we decided to not include, that was almost 10 years ago. We weren't talking about a carnivore diet then. So this is the new kid on the block. But powerful intervention. And we have a lot of coaches listening who personally live this lifestyle. I teach health coaches at our school. We teach in our advanced coaching course and in our business coaching course. We have more and more graduates at our school who are doubling down on the carnivore approach as their niche. So it's growing. Yeah, that's for sure.
What's
all
next?
Right. Next is the basic elimination diet. So that's interesting, like a basic elimination diet. How would you generally summarize what a basic elimination diet is as compared to maybe some of the ones we've already talked about?
Well, a basic elimination diet is quite well established in allopathic medicine as well, but there are a number of fairly common allergens, and they sort of call them the big 8, dairy and eggs and seafood and peanuts and tree nuts and so on. So the ones that a lot of people know about, and they are actual immune mediated allergies. So the chapter goes into what is a true allergy, what is it, like an immediate allergy, what's a delayed allergy, what's an intolerance, like the difference between them. And this chapter is just sort of the really basic introduction to how do you take a group of foods out of your diet, and then how do you do a elimination diet? And that's where the log comes in and that kind of stuff. And it's really, a lot for health coaches. I think a lot of what they can do is help people find all of the hidden sources of these foods. I mean, it's easy to say, take milk out of your diet. It's not so easy to say, that when you see something on a nutrition or label, like an ingredient list, that is dairy, like the whey protein, right?
Yeah.
Or, where are eggs hiding in foods, right? I have a young vegetarian friend who's a Hindu, and he eats dairy, but he doesn't eat eggs. Well, first time I ever met him, because we didn't know him at that point, I took him out for breakfast at our local restaurant. How do you do Canadian breakfast without eggs? Think about it, right? Eggs, waffles, pancakes, omelets, like we ended up buying him a grilled cheese sandwich. So, there's just so many places like you have to kind of think about that. North American baking is entirely based on eggs. European style baking is based on eggs. You come from India, it's not based on eggs, right? So there's lots of places where a health coach can really help with those hidden things, so that when you do an elimination diet, you're actually eliminating it all the way.
Right.
Yeah.
And then those sort of delayed sort of allergy response, that these sort of these mediated allergy responses, that sort of like you could have a response up to 4 or 5 days afterward, and helping your clients recognize that, because they think, oh, I had dairy today and I'm fine. It's like, well, we got to kind of wait it out, because it could be a delayed response, and it could be a sore knee or a zit. It's not going to be just bathroom troubles. Like, we helping our clients understand what these food sensitivities, how they show up. I think that's a really cool opportunity for us to be educators, to help our clients really understand the body response to these things. Okay, we're going to move right along to chapter 7, which is specific carbohydrate diet, so SCD and low FODMAPs. So now we're getting more narrow focus.
Yep.
Talk to us about these two real quick.
So this was fascinating. Again, these are not ones that, especially the SCD, that I was familiar with. I had always known about Elaine Gottschall and the specific, what was it called? The gut. Forget what her original book title was years ago, but it seemed like one of those kind of wingy things. But there's science behind this stuff. These two diets deal with the GI tract. And particularly disease states and intolerances in the GI tract. And there's a big difference between Crohn's and colitis, which are called the inflammatory bowel diseases, or IBD, and irritable bowel syndrome, which is IBS, to make it confusing. And one is a physical damage that's done by components of the diet and other inflammatory processes that are going on. And the other one, there's no physical damage at all. It's all about intolerances, to actual, like just a hypersensitivity almost to particular food components. These are pretty well almost all plant components. And the specific carbohydrate diet actually is designed to help with symptoms of Crohn's and colitis. Ulcerative colitis, because the gut wall is damaged to the point where the enzymes that are normally being produced by the cells in the gut wall to break down the simple disaccharides like table sugar, they just aren't there. And so those digestive processes aren't happening the way they should. So the diet actually it goes right into the weeds about where the carbohydrates in those plant foods are. Are they monosaccharides? Are they disaccharides? Are they polysaccharides? And we take out the ones that are everything except monosaccharides, so that you don't have to have that gut wall process working. Yeah. And the FODMAPs is more about physical intolerances or hypersensitivities to particular plant chemicals, usually polysaccharides or oligosaccharides.
Amazing. All right, trucking along. The next stop on our functional therapeutic diet journey is autoimmune protocol, which we've talked around quite a bit. It is the ultimate, very, very strict and precise elimination protocol, where a lot of things get eliminated, and then there's this very deliberate reintroduction. Well, to be honest with you, all elimination diets should follow that basic approach: strictly eliminate, reintroduce. But the list of foods in the autoimmune protocol is tremendous. Give us the high level on that one.
So the immune system's designed to protect us from foreign invaders, right? Not self. But in some conditions and in some situations, and we talk about in the course about what some of those are, the immune system turns on itself, turns on our own cells and causes problems. And it can turn on something that's in a particular organ, or it could just be something that is a component of every cell, in which case, if it's like a particular receptor on a cell or something that it's not recognizing or responding to, then the symptoms can be system-wide, and that's where you get like whole body inflammatory responses and things like lupus and stuff.
Wow.
And it can be neurological, it can be physiological, like there's all kinds of different, there's over 80 different autoimmune diseases that are identified. And basically the concept is that a lot of this has to do with the immune system in the gut, and that we need to heal the gut and reduce almost every possible potential inflammatory stimulant through a really strict elimination phase. So, I mean, you're basically down to, boiled meat and broth and, a few overcooked vegetables in this elimination phase. It's incredibly strict, incredibly difficult, but people with especially the widespread autoimmune diseases can get some relief, and then as they start to reintroduce foods, they can get some answers.
Mm-hmm.
So, the reintroduction, the elimination phase is hard, but often healing. And then the reintroduction phase is very, very much illuminating for what can be put back in and what can cause problems. And as Erin said, like you can eat something and then, 2 days later, you suddenly all your joints are sore again or something.
Yeah.
After you've managed to resolve that. So the reactions are the important thing. And again, documenting, using a log, being able to be that investigative, inquiring mind that helps your clients see past something.
So granular.
Dig deep, right?
That's right. I think of a client that I had who I put on just a paleo diet, because that's what I do with everybody, who we were working through weight loss, to be honest with you, working through insulin resistance and weight loss, which is kind of my realm. And she reported one day in a coaching session, oh, by the way, I haven't had to take the pain pills for my knees in a couple of weeks. And I said, I didn't know you were on pain pills for your knee. And she said, well, I didn't think we were working on knee pain. I thought we were doing weight loss. And I was like, oh, well, let me explain to you maybe why your knees suddenly feel better. And kind of going through this immune response for the inflammatory foods. It's wild to me that, autoimmune diseases are one thing, but there's this whole idea of like autoimmune symptoms, that people live with, just these flares of little kind of unwellness, nebulous feelings of just, I'm just not feeling my best, or maybe that they chalk it up to aging or some kind of genetic predisposition, like, and removing in these sort of immunogenic compounds. They didn't know they could feel that good. And it's,
I know, it's like, right?
Yeah, it's powerful. Food is powerful. Okay, our final chapter. This is the one that you kind of touched on a second ago. You had to learn about some of this stuff because it was not in your sort of world at all. So these specialty elimination diets that pertain to anti-nutrients and chemicals that can cause damage. So walk us through these guys.
Well, I gotta find my list, because I even had to make a list of them.
Yeah.
So things that are mostly plant-based, not all of them, but they are chemical components of foods that can have specific reactions in certain individuals who have often a hypersensitivity. So one of the big ones that's fairly well known is oxalates.
Mm-hmm.
And oxalates are a plant chemical. They're like a sharp little needle-like crystal in the plants. They come in all different configurations, but they're basically they're a plant defense. And some people are exceedingly sensitive to them. They're very tiny, and if you have any kind of gut leakage or anything, they can get into your bloodstream, and then they can go places, and they can get deposited in joints, and they can get deposited in your kidneys, and they can get deposited all over your body.
Wow.
And cause all kinds of health problems. Getting rid of them is more than just taking them out of your diet, because then your body will start to dissolve them and move them around within your body. And so you can actually get flares that happen after you take the oxalates out of your body. So reducing oxalate intake is more of a gradual process. It's not just an elimination process. And it can be life altering to get this stuff out. But it's not just a matter of, quitting.
Yeah.
There's consequences to quitting. So this is one that I have, a personal, of the 4 that we cover, this is the one that I knew a fair bit about, because my son has kidney stones, and joint pain, despite being a young and otherwise pretty healthy young man. And he was getting into ankle pain and elbow pain and wrist pain and stuff, as a healthy 20-something-year-old. And we kind of figured that maybe it was oxalates. And so he started, my son is developmentally challenged. He lives on his own, but we made him a high oxalate, low oxalate shopping list. And so when he goes to the grocery store now, like he was making smoothies with spinach and raspberries and blackberries and almond butter and like all the things, right? Because they were all healthy. And I mean, in a normal paleo primal sort of life world, they are, but these are things that we had to take out for him. And it did make a difference in his joint pain issues, and the kidney stones, as far as we know, have never progressed, or we're not even sure if they're still there. But
so we're just continuing to chip away basically at this stage in the game. We're chipping away now, getting into very more specific potential sensitivities and triggers for health conditions. So the four that we talk about in this course are oxalates, glutamate, salicylates, and histamines. So really four important compounds that I know virtually nothing about as well. And it's so interesting. It's the world of nutrition and health is so vast. It's not possible to know everything. So that's the pep talk for anybody listening who thinks, wow, I don't know how to execute any of these things. Don't worry, that was never the expectation. But if you want to learn how to execute some of these deeper interventions, we got you. We made this course exactly for that reason. It's written for health coaches. 100% for health coaches to help their clients chip away at their symptomatology, basically, is what it comes down to, really.
Yeah. And just an awareness that they're there.
Yeah.
I didn't have a clue about histamines before. I went to a conference once and saw a talk on histamines, and it's like, histamines, what are those? And even afterwards, I really didn't get it. But I kind of went back, circled around, and got it as I was writing this course, as to what they are, because they're part of the immune system. They're part of the immune system response. That's what antihistamines are, to protect against a histamine response. But some people they're triggered by all kinds of things, and including just the histamines that are present in food.
Right. Yeah. No, it's a wonderful course, Martha. You did such a great job, and it's written so well. Like I'm enjoying reading it. It's because it is geared toward the health coach brain, the health coach scope of practice. We love that as educators. We love keeping our health coaches nice and tidy and in scope. And as we already talked about, this is where big change can happen. I mean, you spoke to this as a registered dietitian, as a licensed healthcare practitioner. Health coaches have the opportunity to get into the weeds on how things feel and how small little dietary changes do or don't impact symptoms, which is immediately helpful to the client from the perspective of teaching them about their body, moving them towards self-efficacy, autonomy, right? They get to learn about how their body responds to this, that, or the other thing. They get to make food choices for the rest of their life because you helped teach them. It's such a wonderful opportunity we have. And this course is a really incredible tool for health coaches. And we're just grateful to you for putting the pedal to the metal and writing this one.
I'm grateful for running into the two of you at Metabolic Health Summit last May, and you offering me this opportunity, because yes, I feel like I've grown a great deal in doing this, and I'm really happy to be able to give back to the community, because like I say, I was one of those legacy people. I talked to Laura in 2016. You've been doing this a while.
I have. I just love that we're finally, in the last year, we've really doubled down on these specialty courses. And this one was one that we really wanted to write, and we wanted to be very careful of how we wrote it so that health coaches felt confident in taking it, and that they can move forward and learn how to have conversations with their clients without getting into trouble. And that is all laid out in here. And as Erin said, this is written for health coaches. And look, there will likely be circumstances that health coaches should probably be, hold on a minute, these are these symptoms that this client, I think we need to move this over to a practitioner so we know what we're actually dealing with, rather than just throwing ideas at a wall and seeing what happens, and so feel empowered to do that as a health coach, to lean on those that actually have the license required to do that. And then we can kind of round things back here. And now with a course like this, you've got the tools to help the clients navigate through this apply it and understand its relevance to them based on whether it's just their symptoms or their diagnosis, their general unwellness. I'm really excited for this because I think this has been a tool that's been a long time coming, that really wasn't out there before, unless it was an entirely different program that was like $5,000. This is much more approachable. You know, so this is going to go live, what, Erin, May 15th, right? Is the
Yeah. So May 15th, as of the publishing of this podcast, which is a couple days after, it is live. So it's live. It's ready to roll. We're excited.
It's live. It's out there. Yeah. So for those of you listening live right now, the Primal Health Coach community, check your emails about how to do just that and jump in on the pre-order process. And those of you listening to the podcast, when it comes out, give us a call, click on the link to learn more, and we can walk through and answer any questions that you have. But Martha, this has been just what a great conversation. And I'm so glad that you felt you got something out of this too, not just giving back to the health coach,
totally.
that you got something out of this too. So that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Awesome. Well, thanks for connecting again, Martha. Always nice to spend time with you.
You too. You too. We'll maybe see you in San Diego.
Is that a low carb? Is that low
Yeah.
carb? Oh,
Are you doing that one?
We'll be at the Metabolic Health Summit in January. Are you going to that one?
Don't know that I'm going to that one. I know I'm going to San Diego. Haven't quite figured out next year yet.
Well, we'll see. Well, with any luck, we hope to see you soon.
Awesome.